Welcome to the Vintage Ballers Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest, my father, Joe Coreno. Joe grew up next door to baseball legend Rocky Calaveto, and his grandfather was the council clerk of Cleveland, Thad Fusco. He spent many years in the trades as a bricklayer before becoming president of the Cleveland Bricklayers Union in 2001, where he served for 18 years. So without further ado, please welcome my father, Joe Coreno. Well, Dad, I want to welcome you to the show, and it's pretty cool having you on here.
I'm really excited to be here.
So obviously, when it comes to sports, you're the first person that ever got me into sports. And, I remember as a little kid going to Indians games at the old stadium and Browns games and Cavs games at, Richfield Coliseum and all that. So, and we'll get into Brett and his career and some of the stuff he did. So sports for me, as you know, has been a huge part of my life, and you were the main reason why. So to have you on the show is pretty awesome.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, sports was everything with me too, and loved the Cavs, the Browns, and the Indians were always big part of my life, obviously with your brother too. And as you were coming up as a little kid, you saw that and you heard. And your brother and I followed really close. I mean, we followed all the statistics and everything, and we still do really. But your brother was pretty good in high school and college, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to see all that, and I'm sure that had an impression on you as you were growing up. But other than that, I really don't know where you want to go with this as far as your background. You know what I mean? I know you're very well informed. I've watched all your interviews so far, and you're very well informed on each person. And that's not easy to do. And as you know, when I started, I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a broadcaster more than anything. And I grew up with Jack Corrigan, the former voice of the Indians, who's now the voice of the Colorado Rockies. So we were doing that when we were kids, and it's always stuck with me. And now that you're doing that, I'm really proud of you, and I enjoy watching all the people we've had on. We've collected a pretty good assortment of different kind of people to be on here, and I think you've interviewed them real well. So,
well, thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
Speaking of Jack Corrigan and all that, let's take it back to your youth and start with Rocky Calaveto. Talk about growing up next door to Rocky and what that meant, and talk about Grandpa Fusco a little bit and where he was.
Okay, well, the thing here was we lived next door to a ball player at that time. People might not know who I'm talking about, but
In Cleveland.
his name he was with absolutely the California Angels and Chicago. His name was Ken Mcbride. In fact, he started the 1963 All-Star game. He was a real good pitcher, good guy. And when he would leave for his teams, he would rent them to the Indians. And there was all sorts of Indians that lived there. We had Dick Williams, the former manager, lived there. Russ Nixon lived there. And then, of course, Rocky Calaveto, who was a very good friend of the family's. And I think you've seen him a few times. You probably still remembers me as a little kid.
Yep.
But Rocky was my hero. I always think of today with all the things they have in the media. Rocky would be a sensation because he was a good guy. When he lived next door to us, he'd be sitting on his porch and there would be kids lying down the street waiting for his autograph.
Wow.
I'd sit there and watch him. He was a very popular guy. He hit home runs, and I mean, he was just a good guy, period. And today he would be big time. When I think of LeBron, who I really enjoyed today, I mean, let's face it, LeBron took over the city as far as a number one man, but back in those days, Rocky was the number one guy. And, I don't know. I can tell you more things about him as far as what I did. He used to play for us. And then a guy by the name of Frank Lane, who used to be our general manager, traded him in 1960 for Harvey Keene, which was trading a 300 hitter for a home run hitter. And the people here went crazy. I don't think we ever lived it down. We're still trying to live that down. And Rocky was just a superb Cleveland Indian, and so he went to the Detroit Tigers for this Harvey Keene. And what I did then as a kid, I was 10 years old then. I started to become a Detroit Tiger fan, and I listened to them because you could pick them up on their radio from Detroit. You could pick it up easily from here. So I'd listen to all the games and I followed them, and Rocky was my hero. And then eventually he came back in '64, actually saved the Indians from moving out of town. He came here and the attendance went back up, and he was here for a couple of years. And then eventually the DH wasn't in play then. So he would have made a tremendous DH, but at that point he was just a couple of years away from having the DH. So he went out, he retired, and but as far as I'm concerned, he had the biggest influence on my life. I mean, Rocky was really something, and knowing him was even better. When I would tell people I knew him, they probably didn't believe me, but it was the truth. He lived next door to us. And like I said, he got friends with my grandfather, who at the time was the council clerk of Cleveland, city council clerk, Thad Fusco. And they hit it off real well. And he hit it off real well with my dad. My dad was similar to Rocky Calaveto in a lot of ways, both being Italian. They liked the same Italian dishes, and my mother would cook for them. And it was a fun time in my life. And I was just a little kid, and I really didn't understand the meaning of it all until I got older. And then as I got older, it was long gone. I wished I would have been around, or I would have been my age then, to be able to understand what I do now about the sport, but I didn't back then. And, but it was fun. It was fun. Like I said, my grandfather was the council clerk of Cleveland, city council clerk, and he was pretty well known. He was on TV once a week. He used to give a report on Channel 8. And, he knew a lot of the players, and I got to know a lot of people through him. And in fact, a lot of the people today through me were really introduced by him. So it goes back a couple generations, and but as far as sports goes, it was everything to me. And we go back to my childhood. Jack Corrigan, who you had on your show already, we used to play wiffle ball because we lived in a cul-de-sac, and we made like the cul-de-sac a stadium. And in that stadium, the curb was the fence, and you couldn't go onto the tree lawn because that would be like jumping over the fence. And we put bases in the street, and we'd hit one each out of your hand. You'd have a wiffle ball. You'd hit it out of your hand, and as you were hitting it, you'd be the announcer. And then when Jack would be up, he would be the announcer. So we were doing a lot of things back then that never thought it would come to this at this point in my life. But he became a very good announcer. Obviously, he took the Indians for a few years. He did good. And I got kind of mad when they let him go and he went to Colorado. But Jack's a good guy, very good guy. He lived on our street, as your mother did. Your mother lived next door to us. So we all grew up together, and we definitely were sports people. That street, that cul-de-sac had more games in there. And a lot of my friends, as I went along, we played football out there, and there was a street light we used to kick over, did place kicking over there. I mean, we did it all. So it was a big part of my life. And then once I got married and started having kids, and as you know, your brother, he was just blessed with some unbelievable talent, especially at basketball. And it just became more and more. And you were there the whole time to watch all this and see this as you were born. It was fun. I mean, I thought it was great.
And Dad, you take it back to the cul-de-sac you grew up on. I mean, obviously the Dombach family, the Longs, the Marconis, the Corrigans. I mean, there's a zillion families that grew up around there or within the area, and it was just, every time I talk to someone within those families, they talk about the sports back then. And I remember I drove around Uncle Tim, and he was telling me, he could point out every house where someone lived and the sports they played and what they did. And he was younger than you guys. He's probably 15 years younger than you guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, your mom came from a family of 16, if people don't know that. And she was the oldest of 16. I was the oldest of 2. So think of that mix. I guess we mixed pretty good because we've had 3 great children. But we definitely had a lot of time in our street where we all played together, and there were a lot of kids on that street. So sports was the big thing. We did it. And then as we got older with my friends, we used to go up to St. Joe's Academy, which is still there, and play in the front lawn. We made a little baseball field there. We played football up there. We did it all. And then a couple of the guys had basketball hoops, and And that's what with the three major sports. That's all we did. And that's all I did, you know, and this, once I got married and Brett was born, he just grew up. We had a basketball hoop in our driveway. And as a little kid, I'd watch him, and he was 5, 6 years old. He's making shots from the 3-point line. I'm thinking, what the hell? But I never put it together, you know. And then he started playing wiffle ball, and he was a pretty good wiffle ball player. And I'm not wiffle ball. I mean,
Baseball or T-ball.
Baseball, yeah. I'm thinking the wiffle ball. And then as it went into basketball, I started to see things. And then coaches were telling me, I remember when he was in 8th grade, the head coach at North Homestead at the time was Dave Borish, a very good coach, still around, good friend of mine. And he came down to our house one night and told me, he says, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Coreno, your son might play college basketball. He knew that in 8th grade.
Wow.
And I said, really? He says, yeah, you just listen to what we got to do. We'll work him out. We'll bring him places. And he took them all over the city, played with the best players in the city. And Brett just progressed as we went along. And like I say, he did play college basketball. And as a parent, you learn a lot. You learn a lot as a parent. You don't think it's easy, but when you're the parent of a good child, you've got to keep your mouth shut and just watch. You know what I mean? You can't go up and tell the coaches, hey, they got to do this. They're not going to listen. They're going to do what they want to do. And you're at their mercy. And that's fine. That's the way it should be, you know. And then obviously Brett went on to coaching, and he did that for 25 years almost now. He's been a coach. So he knows what that's all about. And someday you'll have to have Brett on your show because
absolutely. We're going to get him on here. Yeah.
You know,
and for those listening, he was the leading scorer in basketball in the city of Cleveland in 1991, 31 points a game. So, right. I mean, he was big time, and I was young then, Dad. So I went to all the games with you and Mom, but I didn't really get how good he was when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. It was too young. I knew he was great. I remember the news cameras coming. I remember him being on the news all the time, everyone talking about him, but I didn't realize how great he really was till I got older. And then
the thing was back then, I mean, he was averaging 30 points a game. And when he went to college, I thought, boy, they're going to be, you know, really impressed with him. There was a kid on the team when he was a freshman, averaged 35 points a game. He was a guard, but I thought that just goes to show you the competition.
I think that was Matt Powell, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Matt Powell.
Matt could shoot the lights out. Oh,
he was unbelievable, you know, and he had a good effect on Brett.
He did.
But Brett was they played him at center, but he would swing out and really be a guard center in a way. But he was 6'5", and his foot speed cost him, because there were a couple of scouts a few times. There was a scout from
Super.
I think it was the
Warriors.
The Warriors. I thought it was.
It was both. It was both. It was the Warriors.
Maybe both were there. Yeah, and they came up to me, and and they said, "Mr. Coreno, your son's a good player." He says, he should play college ball, And then when he went to college, we played. I think it was Ashland University. And I can't think of who was there. A guy who did go on to the. NBA.
It was Central State. It was I think it was Priest Lauderdale, who was he was like 7 foot 5 or something. He was huge.
Right. And one of the scouts was there that night, and they told me, your son could play NBA basketball if he was faster or taller. He's 6'5" guard who was not fast. You know what I mean? And to play guard in the NBA, you better be fast, because you're going to be going up against some pretty fast guys. Yep. But it was exciting, to hear it. And I just shut my mouth and listened, and, very proud of it. And at that time, you were coming along. You were coming to these games. In fact, we have films where we can see you as a little kid in the background. You cheering him on and screaming when he did stuff. And it was extremely, extremely entertaining and fun as a parent.
Oh, it had to be. And Brett was a 2-time MVP in college, back-to-back. Yes, he's actually I believe to this day, the only back-to-back MVP of that conference, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. That's exactly right.
He would hate us talking about him right now.
Oh God, he'd go crazy. He would never mention anything about anything he did.
You would never know he played basketball.
I told everybody. I used to tell people at the store, the gas station, wherever I went, I would tell them all about my son and what he was doing. And as a parent, you're so proud, and you don't want to brag. But at the same time, you don't want that to all go away and never mention it. And he was something to watch, as you knew, and like I said, and as you were coming up, you were trying to mimic him down the basements and doing things. You always had a not a wiffle ball, a sponge type
Nerf ball.
Nerf ball. Boy, I can't think of that. But you had a Nerf ball thing down the basement, and that's where you played. So it was surrounding us. It was basically our family. We did that.
And Dad, the cool thing about what you just mentioned about me mimicking Brett and playing with the Nerf balls, a lot of the guys. So back then, I would have these little leagues in my, by myself, or Mark Anusko or someone would play.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we would act like we're the NBA players at that time, which are some of the guys I've had on the show. So it's cool.
Yes, that's right.
So it's cool. And I talk to these guys. I'm like, I used to act like I was you when I was 8 years old.
Exactly.
It's really neat to talk to these guys.
I know it is. It's unbelievable because I'm seeing a lot of the guys that, I remember as watching, because Brett and I, when you were real little, that's all we did was watch NBA games in the winter. We watched every Browns game. I had a season's pass to the Browns from 1960 to 1995, and then they wanted me to pay for it to get it back.
That's
and
shitty.
I told the guys I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? I was tired of it and just tired of going down there and being screamed in the back and people standing up in front of you and everything. And I love the fact that they were all on TV, and still to this day, the fact that the games are all on TV is my biggest joy, is to watch everything on TV. And all three sports, the Cavs, the Indians, and the Browns, have almost every game on TV. So I'm in front of it and I'm watching, and what can I say? That's a good thing for a sports fan.
Oh yeah, for sure. And as you got older, Dad, I mean, like, when did you, I guess with your love of sports, like, because growing up in Cleveland, you saw a championship with Jim Brown and those guys back in '64. You were actually at that game.
I was at that game.
So what was it like first of all, what was it like to be at the last Browns championship?
Well, it was unbelievable. And again, I didn't even appreciate it or understand it at the time. We sat on the 50-yard line for the 1964 Browns game with my Uncle John. And I mean, 3 touchdown passes to Gary Collins in that game. And Paul Warfield was the main receiver, but they triple teamed Paul Warfield, and Gary Collins had a field day. He had 3 touchdowns, one that was unbelievable, but it was packed, And the one thing that I remember, and I think fans will get a kick out of it, they used to be able to go on the field and tear the goalposts down. And I remember going home with my Uncle John and driving over the parking lot over the shoreway and looking down, and I saw a bunch of guys carrying one end of the goalpost to their car. And so those are the kind of things I remember, as a young kid. But
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that story with the goalpost.
Yeah. And it happened. I mean, it was things that you experience. But again, I never ever stopped being a Browns fan or an Indians fan or a Cavs fan. It was the Cavs right when it started, and when they started in 1970, actually, no, they weren't very good, but at least it was basketball. It was something to watch. You had a home team to watch, because we didn't have that before. You'd watch the Lakers, and the game of the week was just different teams that were good. But when the Cavs came along, then we started watching everybody. You never watched the Western conferences. You saw some of the Eastern conferences guys, but not the Western conference so much. So you started to find out about every guy in the league. And now, you and I have seen this at the All-Star game here. They went over all those guys at halftime.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a lot of the names that I had forgotten. And that was brought back a lot of good memories.
Oh yeah, it had to. So when you think about going for 52 years without a championship, what was it like when the Cavs finally won that championship, in 2016?
Well, I was ecstatic. I mean, I didn't know what to do. And I was already a big fan of LeBron. I know a lot of people have turned on LeBron because he left twice and all that, but I still think he's a hell of a guy. You don't see him in any trouble. He's a family man. There's a lot of good things about LeBron. And I know now there's, they started, well, would you ever bring him back and all that? And he'll screw up the team if he. I'd love to see him back. I really would, because I think he's still the best player in the game right now as of 2020. He's 37 years old and he's coming to the end, but he's still one hell of a player. And the fact that he did so much for Cleveland, like help us win that 216 championship game, was a major thing, the major thing for Cleveland. And like I said, the last time I had seen something like that was in the 64 championship game. And nothing. The Indians were close. They went to the World Series a few times, but never had the enjoyment. And I always think, and I've probably told you and my other son, Brett, how my whole life I've been waiting for the Indians to win a World Series, and I hope I see them, in my lifetime. Now, I've seen them in a World Series, but I haven't seen them win the World Series.
Yep.
The Cavs are the only team I've seen since '64 win a championship. And obviously, if the Browns went to the Super Bowl, I would be ecstatic
Yeah,
to be unbelievable. I wouldn't
Northeast
know
Ohio
what
would
to do.
be. Oh
Oh,
my
I
God.
wouldn't know what to do. I'd have a party here. I'd have everything you could imagine if they ever went to a Super Bowl. I don't know how happy I'd be, but I would be very happy.
Yeah, for people who aren't from Cleveland, I always tell people they don't understand how big the Browns are here. I mean, it's
No.
everything to people in Cleveland. Even
No.
it's just that's on Sundays, it's just like a religion here. I mean, Browns
and we've got great fans. I mean, I was saw this year that like the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, but their first game they didn't even sell out. We sell out. I mean, we haven't won anything, and we sell out. The fans in Cleveland are fans. They really are, because they've been treated so roughly. Basically, had so many losing seasons, and yet they're really true, honest fans, and that's what I love about Cleveland.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, some of the
So
very diehard fans here and people who are loyal to their team.
Yeah.
That's what I love about the Midwest in general. The Midwest has a lot of loyal fans.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. And hopefully that'll continue, because like I say, as long as they have the games on TV, I'll be one happy guy. That's for sure.
I'm the same way. I mean, you know that. And I think,
yeah.
so, let's go back to now when I was born, back in the early 80s. And, did you, at that time, obviously Brett's coming up and he's, going to be, you see the skill in him and everything. Did you have any idea the impact that you were having on me when it came to sports?
No, I didn't. And I didn't know. And by mistake, you would just imagine that your second son would be like your first son. And it's not fair. It wasn't fair to you. And as you did play basketball in high school and stuff, and their coaches heard all about Brett and everything, and they just expected you to be like that. That wasn't really fair, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you did good. You weren't bad, but you weren't Brett. And I'm not taking anything away from you, but Brett was a special thing, And again, I can't take any of that credit. Brett was born with that, and you just there's certain things you're born with, and there's certain things you're not. And he was born with it all, and he did it, and he took advantage of it, and that was good. And really, you did well. Well, what you did is more on this broadcasting side. You're more of a broadcaster than you would be of a player, and that's happy for me. Good for me. My two sons,
Yep. No, you're right. It's funny how that worked out. That Brett was the player, and I would do my podcast and have other things going on. So that's that is interesting how that panned out.
How it worked out. Yeah, it did. And my daughter, she was, and I've said this many times. An old timer once told me at work. I used to tell him, because when my Aunt Marie, your sister, and my daughter was born, she was the second child, and I wanted another boy, because I wanted to have a whole basketball or baseball team, And I went to work the next day, and the guy said, "Joe, what's that?" I said, "Well, I had a little girl." And he was an old timer, and he looked at me and he said, "Joe, a son is a son till he gets a wife. A daughter's a daughter for the rest of your life." And boy, that is the truth. And now Anne-Marie is my world. She does everything for me. But the thing is, your sons, and if they do take into sports like you did, you become very partial to that. Because a lot of parents, a lot of guys I know, their kids just never got into it, or could care less, or even the parents could care less, and the sons were good and they could care less. But that's not what happened with me. I had two great sons, and very happy they both went their way.
Well, I mean, looking back then, and you're right, Anne-Marie was more of in the singing, and she had a lot of other talents that she was in.
Yes, she did.
I wish she would have pursued them even more, because she had a ton of talent with all that.
Yes.
And she'll hate us bringing this up too. But, and then she's doing other things now, of course. But, looking back at that time as I grew up, again, with Brett being a star in high school and all that, it was just natural to want to love sports. I mean, I was around it 24/7, and you guys were, you're always doing something, playing wiffle ball, throwing the football around, shooting the basketball.
And I'm sure you knew, for me, I am like a sore loser. Anytime the Indians would lose,
we never knew that.
I pouted all night. When the Browns would lose, I pouted all week. I mean, I wanted my teams to win so bad that they were like part of my life, that they had to win all the time. And a lot of my friends are kind of like that. A lot of them take it easy come, easy go. Not me. I took it as a very selfish type thing. Those teams meant everything to me, and they still do.
Oh yeah,
I
you're the
mean,
most diehard loyal guy when it
oh,
comes to Cleveland sports.
honest to God, I
Probably to a
certainly am.
fault.
To a fault. Yeah,
Yeah.
to a fault. It's too much sometimes because they still get mad.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, if the Browns lose, I turn that TV off and I'm mad all day. And I. But hey, what are you going to do? I'd rather have that than anything else. If that's my bad habit, then I guess I'm doing okay.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. So I want to take it at your actual career because you became a bricklayer, of course. And
Right.
talk a little bit about that because you have some. First of all, you have some great stories, but second of all, how brutal of a job was that physically to do that?
It's
For
a
many
tough
years?
job. It's a tough job. And, I became the president of the union.
Yep.
So I worked my way up there. And basically, because I was with a very, very tough company when I started, and it's a brutal trade. I mean, it's a lot of lifting, climbing. I mean, you do a lot. And I was up for it. But at the same token, I realized how tough it was going to be all my life. And I stayed in it the whole 50 years. I mean, I was a bricklayer I've been a bricklayer 52 years. So from the day I started until the day I retired, it's been my trade. And like I said, I took the union side of it very, very seriously and knew as a young kid that that's where I wanted to be, is in the union. And I did. I worked my way as president. And those are the things that were important to me, is being very loyal to your union, because your union is the guy, or the thing that gets you your wages and gets the right things for the job itself. They try to make it right. They can't always. We're at a disadvantage for some of that, but it's still the only way. And thank God the union now, I have a good pension because of the union, and I'm living okay at 70 years old because I was in a union. So that's one thing about that.
Now, go back to some of the funny stories back, in those days. You have some great stories. I mean, ones you want to tell. Give me 2 or 3 good stories about being a bricklayer. All the crazy. You saw a lot of crazy stuff.
Well, I did. I'm trying to think of something here without swearing and getting cursed.
You can swear a little bit. I don't care.
Well, I'm trying to think of something. I'm gonna have to think hard of some stories the people you meet in the trade. And I remember some of the guys telling me, you're going to meet people that very well have an IQ to even drive there. And the other ones have an IQ that they could do whatever they want. And it was the truth. There was either bricklayers that were so very smart, very good, or there were bricklayers that barely knew how to get to work. And when you get mixed up with them, and I was always a teaser. I always like to tease guys and do that. I'd imitate their voices and stuff like that. But basically, you had to be on your best behavior because you had to perform every day. The other trades could do other things, not a bricklayer. They're counting how many brick you lay, how many block you lay. So there's no fooling around. And if you don't do what they want, you're laid off. And I had 3 children, and I made sure that I tried not to get laid off. And the older I got, the worse I got on the job as far as taking any crap from anybody. I kind of did what I wanted in my last 10 years or so. But my first 25 or 30 years, I was kind of nervous and scared about a lot of the things I had to go through. But you know what? It did me fine. I mean, yeah, I'm 70 years old now and still in relatively good shape. And like I say, I wouldn't want anybody I know to become a bricklayer. And when I sat on those boards where the young kids would come in, I would tell them, guys, this is a tough trade. And plus, you don't work all the time. The weather dictates a lot of what you do. The economy has a lot. Sometimes the trade had so much work, you couldn't do it all. And there were other years where you barely made your unemployment weeks. And that was bad, But I'm glad I did it. I mean, I'm glad I became a bricklayer. I'm proud of what I did for over the years. And the fact that I became president was a good move because I really got to see that end of the trade, because there's more to it than just laying brick. There's a lot that goes behind it, and the contractors and how everything is bid and stuff like that. I learned a lot. I really did.
Oh yeah, I remember you talking about all that as a kid growing up, and so I kind of learned from you because you were on some big jobs back then.
Oh yeah,
you were on some huge jobs.
Yeah. Well, I was the foreman on the library downtown.
Yep.
That was probably the biggest job I ever did. And I worked down there, and I worked on a lot of jobs. I was the foreman for a little while, but the foreman, you had to be more for the contractor than you would the union. So that really didn't do me well. I didn't like that end of it. I would rather just go to work, do my job, and come home. And that's how I lived my career. Basically, I did my job and came home.
And Dad, when you look back at your career, you give me one or two things you learned from being a bricklayer all those years and working in that environment?
Well, you learn how to manage your money, because one week you're doing good, the next week you're not doing good. So you can't live, you just can't go by and be a window shopper and say, yeah, I want one of these. You can't do that. You have to, I remember my father used to tell me, you don't buy anything unless you have the money for it. So credit cards were completely out of my line when you kids were young, because I didn't want to get into that. I didn't want to get to owe a lot of money on a credit card. But, again, everything I did pretty much what I wanted. And like I said today, I'm proud of my kids more than anything. You guys all turned out wonderful. And that a lot of parents can't say that, but I can honestly say that my kids have turned out to be wonderful.
Well, so thank you for that. So
except you.
No, yeah, and you're gonna say that, bust my balls a little bit. But and we're actually, for those watching, we're being pretty tame right now. We usually swear a lot more. We're all.
Oh yeah, I'm being nice. Yeah, I'm biting my tongue. You don't know what I want to start doing.
Trust me, we both are doing that. So, you're talking about, when you became president of the union back in 2001, and you did that for 18 years. What were some of the challenges of being president, and what did you learn in that role?
Well, you're kind of like they used to say, you're always putting out a fire, meaning there's a problem, you're the guy they come to, and there's business agents which really run the show there. They are the guys that get you the jobs and all that. But between your business agent and, say, the president, you'll get guys who will call you and say, hey, come out to this job, or do this or do that. And there were a lot of things that my hands were tied on and I couldn't do. So you learned over the years that you just did what you can, and you had to listen to both sides of the story, because sometimes the guys would be complaining about something and it really wasn't that true, or it was blown out of proportion, or just the opposite. Sometimes the contractors would tell you, oh, we're going to do this, and they didn't do shit. Mm-hmm. And, that used to get me mad. But hey, now I look back and I look out on a day when it's real cold and know that I don't have to get in my car and go to work. You don't know how happy I am.
Well, I do.
But that's about all. There's a lot of things that happened over the years that, I was on a job one time, and the way we were building it, it was I kind of knew, and I was only maybe out of my apprenticeship, maybe a year or two. I was like 22, 23. And the wall we were building, we were tying it in wrong. The guys were doing it. I was just in the middle of the wall, and all of a sudden it fell, hit the planks of the scaffold, landed on our feet and everything. And it dawned on me, this is not funny. This is a very, very reckless kind of job, and you can get killed very easily. And I saw a lot of guys get hurt. I was only hurt twice where I had to go to a hospital in 50 years. So I was very lucky. And that's not the case. A lot of guys have gotten hurt. It's a tough job. And like I said, I didn't want my kids doing it. As you know, when Brett played college basketball, I was glad he went into teaching. And to me, that's a good profession. And I'm glad you do what you do now. And I just didn't want to see you do that, because I knew how hard it was and how tired you come home. And, I didn't want to see that for my own kids. But I had a lot of fun. A lot of guys that I work with, we just, there's a guy you just talked to, one of the laborers, Eddie Vlack.
I love Eddie.
Oh yeah. It was a lot of times he would just say things to me. He'd be behind me, bringing me my material and stuff. But he would say something that would be funny, and we'd laugh all day. I miss that kind of stuff. There was like a lot of guys would say when they would talk to each other, they go, "Where you staying?" Instead of "Where you living?" They go, "Where you staying?" Well, we picked up on that one day, and he walked by me every 15, 20 minutes. Go, "Hey, where you staying?" I mean, it was stuff like that I really missed, but it kept the day going. You'd laugh, and we did other stuff. I can't even think of some of the stuff we did.
What are some of the good pranks you pulled?
Well, trying to think that now, my mind has gone blank on a lot of that. I know with Eddie, and he'll tell you, he used to put his gloves, because the labor has to wear gloves, or they would get. We do too, but we wear a thinner glove. They were the big, thick gloves. He'd put them down at lunchtime and everything, and one of his buddies would come over, take mortar, and fill them up with mortar. So when after he'd lunch, he'd go to put his gloves on, they'd be filled with mortar. So there was stuff like that all the time, and there was all kinds of things you could do. I mean, I used to make funny faces in the toilet room, in the plastic toilets. I'd go in there and I'd write things on there, and then somebody would see it. And I don't know. I probably shouldn't even admit that kind of thing, but that's what we did. Those were some. I can't think of the real good ones right off the hand. You got me thinking too much here, but yeah, there was a lot of pranks we pulled, and I remember one guy he reminded me and another friend of mine, Tom Nagy, another good friend of mine, good bricklayer. This guy looked like Shemp of the Three Stooges, and we used to call him Shemp all the time, and he didn't like that, And a couple of times we called him that in front of guys, and he'd look at me and time, he'd go, "Stop that Shemp shit," But he looked like Shemp. And then a couple of times we put blocks under his tires. And when he would drive at night, we'd park behind him and watch him, and the car would rock because there'd be a block behind it. And then he'd spin out, and the block would spin out from the tire. It was stuff like that constantly. Yeah.
And
there were better things.
Oh, that is, I can, these stories are so great. Give us a few childhood prank stories. You have some of the greatest prank stories of all time with the Longs and Frogman.
Well,
and all that,
what I'll tell you, what we did with the Longs, those have been my closest friends. And you talk about guys that I don't know how they made it through life. I mean, they were hard workers, but boy, oh boy, did they have a different look on things. But we had so much fun. We used to go to motels. And I'm telling you, today, if we did this, or if anybody did this, they'd be in jail. But this is going back to 68, 69, 70, 1970. And we'd go to a motel and we'd take the fire extinguisher from a motel. And the fire extinguishers back then, you just dump them out. They had some kind of fluid in there and everything. But they had an air valve on there where if you filled it back up with water and pumped that air up, you could shoot that fire extinguisher out 25 feet, So we would do that. And then we'd go by bus stops and people would be waiting for the bus and we'd spray them with the water. Or we'd get behind a convertible and spray it. You'd see the guy put his top up because he thought it was raining. I mean, it was things like that all the time. Yeah. It never ended. I'm trying to think of some of the good ones we did. There was one time, one of the Longs could make a siren. He could stick his head out the window and make a siren, just like a regular police car. And we'd pull people over. He'd stick his head out the window, and we'd pull people over. And then as we drive by, we'd give him the bird. You know what I mean? And we did that all night one night when we were coming home. This was in Fairview. And we're coming home, and the police cornered it from every way. You know what I mean? You see this on Cops Reloaded where they're coming from every stage. And they stopped us. And the cop came up to the car and said, "All right, where's the siren?" I looked, and I said, "No, he's the siren." I pointed to Tom, who was the guy doing it. And the cop goes, "Get out of here." He got out and he made the siren. And as he made the siren, cars were pulling over. And the cops started laughing. And he told us, "Get back in your car and get the hell out of Fairview." So we did. We got in the car and we never went back. But those are the kind of things we did, besides making fun of people. That's all we ever did was make fun of people. And that was the things that we had going for us back then was our ability to tease people. Now we never did it where we would get punched or anything, but we did it where it was funny and they'd all laugh. And, you would try to pick up somebody's quirks and then really stick it to them,
Didn't one time you guys in school pop Tom's milk? Remember, like he had little, he was
we were in 8th grade. Tom, the guy that made the siren, he would we used to get little milks they would bring us, and in the middle of the morning or so, you took the milk out and you drank it. And one day, Tom and I were the guys who had to count them. They would come in cartons, and we had to count them and then put them in little containers for each room. Like 15, we're going one room, 25 for another, whatever. And then at the end of the day, by the end of the morning, we count them. And Tommy said to me, "Hey," he says, "we got 10 extra." I said, "Are you sure?" He says, "Yeah." So I said, the hell with it. Well, he took them and he put them in his desk. Well, then I knew where they were. Well, when he got up one time, I went in there and we poked them all, and they just slowly leaked out, and they were coming out of his desk. And we had a nun at that time. Her name was Sister Regina Mary. I'll never forget her. She was wonderful. She came and she started laughing. She says, "You guys don't quit, do you?" I said, "No, we don't. We just," and I said, "Those are the milks that were extra," and on and on. But that's the kind of stuff we did,
Oh, it's just so great. I mean, some of those pranks are classic. You told me so
Oh,
many of them over the years, but I mean, that's just, you guys have some
yeah,
great stories.
I could go on and on about it, but I can't think of everything right now. Got me kind of on the spot. But yeah, we did that. Like I said, the Longs were real close to me as a friends growing up. And Tom was probably the toughest guy I knew. He was really tough.
Great football player too.
He was a great football
And so is
player.
so is Bob.
So was his brother Bob,
Yep.
who I'm really probably closer today than Tommy. But Bob didn't take it as serious as Tommy did. I mean, Tommy was a running back, and I'll tell you, when we would play tackle football up at St. Joe's, you didn't want to get in front of him if he was running down the middle, because he'd not push you, he'd knock you over. And I mean, he hit you hard. He was a strong kid, and but a lot of fun to be with. When we'd be in a restaurant or something, somebody give you a dirty look, it was fun to have him around, because right away he'd jump out of his seat and look to fight. He wanted to fight immediately, and he wasn't afraid of anybody or anything. And like I say, I miss a lot of that stuff, But we were young, we were teenagers, and just starting to be getting ready for college, and we had all kinds of things on our mind. Although I went to college for about 6 weeks and realized that wasn't for me. Nobody was throwing spitballs or doing anything funny. They were really studying, and I thought, no place for me, because I don't want to be really studied. So that's when I ended up taking my apprenticeship, and that was fine. It served my point. I made a living. I raised 3 children, so yep. I've got no problem with that. But sometimes I wish I would have stayed in college and learned and did something different. But hey, everybody has regrets.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, you can look at your life in a million different ways, but you did a great job. I mean, you raised 3 kids and you worked your ass off to do it. So
yeah, no, it was. And like I said, I was lucky because I didn't have any troubled kids. There's some troubled kids out there today, especially now more than ever. And you just you don't know what to do for some of those parents, because they just don't know how to handle it. Mm-hmm. And I don't blame them for being the way they're thinking, but at the same token, if you have children, you've got to pay attention. You owe them everything until they get to a certain age. You had them, you know what I mean? You can't just throw them out in the middle of the street like as if nothing ever happened. You're the one who's going to train them. They're going to get to be just like you. Your kids end up doing the same things you do, and the bad habits, good habits, your kids learn it. And you owe your kids to show them good habits if you can.
Yep, it's true. Very true. So, Dad, I know you want to ask me some questions and kind of go over some things with me.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So you start and you let me know what what you're asking.
Okay. What I know is, or what I'd like to know is, when you were small, when did you realize that sports was so important to you?
So I would say that's a great question. I mean, probably when I was like 6 or 7, because I remember you guys had the little mini hoops you bought. Remember that little
right? Oh yeah,
Fisher Price. Ball. Yeah, the Nerf ball. Yep. And I remember I love playing that every day. I would shoot in that thing over and over and over again. And I don't know if it was watching Brett or watching games with you or watching Brett play outside or what it was, but I was probably around 5, 6, 7 years old, somewhere in there, where I remember how much I loved doing that. And then of course it developed into baseball. It was wiffle ball back then. Then of course T-ball, and then football. And I mean, it just went. And I played soccer back then. I did a lot of things, in those days.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it was probably, if I had to guess, it was around 6 years old when I really knew I love sports and how much I had no idea how big of a impact it would have in my life and all the different people I would connect with over time because of it.
I've always wanted to ask you, what kind of an effect did you having a brother that played and set records and all that? What did that have what kind of a feeling did you have about that? Bad or good?
Oh, I loved it. It wasn't bad at all. And you'll have people who think that it was because he was so good. And like you said earlier in the podcast, how it did influence. Like I played for a rival high school for my freshman year, and the coach played against Brett. His name is Craig Bradley. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he told our team multiple times that this guy's brother beat me out for MVP of the league. And, and they knew how good Brett was. Brett was incredible, but I knew that I could never live up to his, and I think I could have been, if I would have stuck with it and went to the weight room a little bit back then, I could have been pretty good, but now Brett was at a different level. I mean, he's at one of the best players in Ohio. That was a whole, but overall, I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I mean, I remember waking up as a kid and being so excited to go to his games at night, like in high school and college, and especially in high school when you would walk in. And I remember vividly, like the cheerleaders walking up to me. I've told you the story before and giving me a hug and, oh, it's little Coreno. And then walking up and all the student section would come up to me. Oh, it's because I would have my shirt on. It's a little Coreno on it. And then I would just kind of go off on my own. It's funny because I didn't even watch some of the game. I wouldn't even watch. I was out in the hallway bouncing my basketball, but I remember coming back in at times and watching and you see Brett out there, but I don't fully get how great he was at the time. I knew he was really good. And I remember looking at you and Mom, and I saw the arena or the gym would be packed and people would be going crazy. But I don't remember. I don't remember thinking like, oh, this is my brother. And I just remember thinking like, okay, I know he's good. I know this is cool. What's going on, but I don't fully get the extent of it. And then as I got older, I think probably his senior year and then definitely in college, I started to realize like how great he was. And then it wasn't really Dad. I told Brett this until after he graduated college, and then he won those MVPs and everything he did. I look back and probably when I was in middle school and I was like, oh shit, he was amazing. And I remember going to North Olmsted High School. I told you this and you were there too. When I was a freshman, they used to have a mural of Brett there. Like they couldn't put his name on there because it's illegal.
They put his number.
They put number 14 on a freaking mural in the gymnasium. And I remember walking in and my friends are going, is that your brother up there? And I was like, it is my brother. It was weird to see that. They took it down since then. They changed it since then.
Well, yeah.
Back then, this is 20 some years ago, but they had a mural. That's how great he was. And again, Brett would hate hearing all this because
he doesn't want to hear
talking about himself. But he was he's still the all-time leading scorer at that high school.
That's right. And among other things that he did, you know what I mean? And he was a good pitcher. He had the lowest ERA for years and years. I don't know if it's still there at the high school, but
I know that Brett Miche always told me, who was Brett's best friend, always told me that he should have, he wished that he could have, pitched in the minor leagues and even possibly the major leagues. Well, Brett Miche was a hell of a player in his own right.
Absolutely.
One of the best catcher I knew.
Definitely. Absolutely. He was all state. He did it all.
Yep.
But with Brett, I can remember, baseball would have been more of my favorite sport than basketball. And I can remember telling Brett, let's go to the batting cages tonight, or, and he'd say no. And then 20 minutes, half hour later, I'd hear that basketball bouncing up and down. And I used to tell myself, mind your own business. Let him do what he wants. You know what I mean? You can't make your kids do something they don't want. And I'm glad I did leave him alone. And thank God he had a one idiot coach, but he had some very good coaches who were good to me because they would tell me what to do, what not to do, where to send them in the summertime, and how to help them. And I listened. I listened as much as I could because, hey, as a parent, I didn't know everything to do when a kid is like that. But I remember I always wondered, what were you thinking when you'd see your father watching every game at night? And that I was so thrilled with watching an Indians game and a Browns game. Didn't you get like aggravated with me after a while?
No, not really, because I like watching it too. So I don't know if I just did it because you liked it at the time. I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I do remember I never hated it. Like I never thought, oh, I got to watch a game. I always loved it. So I don't know if that's just natural, if that just comes naturally to me, and that, some people just like sports, some people don't, or if that was something I learned from you. It's probably both. Yeah. So I remember I don't know how it was probably, I had to be 5 or 6 because I vividly remember watching certain games that happened in the late 80s. And I was born in 83. So I had to be, 7 or under. And I remember sitting there watching. I remember a Browns game when I don't know if it was Rich our kicker back then. It wasn't Stover. It was before Matt Barr, I think it was. I think he hit a game-winning field goal at Denver. We'd beaten them for the first time at Denver in years. And I remember watching that with you. It must have been like a Sunday night game of the week or something, or a Monday night game or something. Yeah. I remember I came down. I can't remember how it happened, but I remember sitting there and you and Brett were there and you were going crazy. And then he kicked the field goal. I remember that vividly. That had to be like 89 or 90. It was a long time ago. And which is interesting because, Reggie Langhorne and Eric Metcalf would have been on that team. And I had those two guys on this podcast.
That's right. You sure did. Yeah.
Reggie's a good friend of yours. Yep.
Oh yeah, Reggie's well, he sells me my car every 2 years, and
Great guy.
he's a great guy. He really and truly is.
One of the
And
funniest guys too. He's
oh yeah, yeah. And I got to be friendly. Talk about place kickers. I got to be friendly with Phil Dawson, who was probably the best place kicker we ever had in Cleveland.
Yep.
And he used to work out. And after my first heart attack, I had bypass surgery. I would go up to the gym at North Homestead, or Westlake, and work out. And he was in there as soon as the season would end, he'd go there because he lived in Westlake then. And I just got to know him. I'd go up and talk to him and everything. He was a hard-working guy, and really a class act. Really a class act. I was mad when they got rid of him because and in fact, now the Browns, you wish they had a kicker like Phil Dawson because he was superior, and those days went by. It seemed like we had a great left tackle in
Joe Thomas.
And then we had a great kicker in Phil Dawson.
And a kick returner in Josh Cribbs. Yeah,
Absolutely.
All those guys. Yeah, we could use all three of those guys right now.
All those guys. We'll take all three of them right now. We'd be in great shape. But hey, they made at least watching the games fun for those guys, because I used to, count everything. I used to watch how many points Phil Dawson had and how many touchdowns Cribbs had and all that. It was something to do that I really enjoyed. And, I guess if you do what you enjoy in this world, you really have it made, as far as I'm concerned. That's what I always tell everybody about a job, young guys. Do something that you're going to be happy with, because you don't want to do something that you're unhappy with for 50 years. Like I said, the trade that I was in, it was tough, but I made it fun with the other guys that I worked with, so that when I went to work, at least I had some fun and I could get through the day. And over the 50 years, and I think more of the stuff that we had fun with than I did the buildings I built, and I was on quite a few in 50 years. So, but that's that. As far as you go, what did you think of having your father be a bricklayer and be into sports and everything? Didn't that, what did you think of that? Let's put it that way.
I loved it. I thought, I knew you were tough. To be a bricklayer, I knew when I was young you were tough, because I had other friends that had, dads in the trades, whether it was pipe fitters or carpenters or whatever it might have been. So I knew you had to be tough, and I don't think I really appreciated the art of laying brick or masonry until I got older. Now I appreciate it way more, because when I look at the brick houses some of my friends own, and you actually, we went out and talked to Matt, over the summer, and you see some of the, I think the more I look at brick buildings now, I truly appreciate, how beautiful they are and what an art form it is.
That's it went out of style for a long time. Not out of style, but they quit building with brick a long time ago. They went into other materials. And when I started, the inside of schools and stuff were all block, Now it's all drywall. So there's less brick than there should be. But it is coming back slowly but surely. The thing about brick, you build a brick building, it's 50 to 100 years before you're going to have any trouble with it.
Wow.
And, there's not many other things like glass or steel or wood. Those things don't hold up all the time. You have to do a lot of maintenance to them. Brick, nothing. Brick is you might have to point it up over a few years if the weather's bad, especially up this way in the colder states. But basically, it's the best building material there is.
Emma, you told me that my whole life. Yeah, and you're right. It is. It definitely is.
And I had I try to tell that to people. I remember being the president, I would say we have the best material in the world. When we build a brick wall, it's there forever. And I used to tell a lot of the young kids when they come up, guys, if you screw it up, it's going to be there forever. It's not going to change. Where a painter could paint a wall and paint it screwed up, and then someone other can come in there and make it nice again. That ain't happening with brickwork. However it is, it's going to be there forever until they tear it down. So that's it. But as far as you go, I was always amazed at what you knew about sports, that you really did keep up on everything, and you were silently learning what was going on with me and Brett. And I didn't really appreciate that, because you were little, you were younger. And I always thought, as you got older, I didn't know where you'd end up until You know more about sports now than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I was out. You remember you were buying me the magazines back then. So you would football,
Yep.
baseball, basketball.
Oh,
Whatever.
yeah.
I'd always have the new. And back then, for the young kids listening, there was no internet back. You didn't have that.
Oh,
You
no.
couldn't go on and see what I mean,
No.
now you can go on and see every roster of every team in America. No, in 2 seconds. But back then, you had to physically buy the magazine and look up the rosters. And then when someone got traded, you had to cross the guy out and put the new team he was on. And it was So me and my friends would do that for fun. But yeah, and I would study those rosters over and over and over. It was one of my hobbies. I just loved doing it.
Today, there's more coverage on high school than there ever
I know.
was.
I mean, hell, there's coverage in everything now. I mean, you just there's nothing you can't find somewhere, on the internet. So it's
and talk shows. I mean, there's talk shows all over the place.
Yep.
And back in my day, there was one talk show. His name was Pete Franklin, and he was the main guy, and he really started all that. And he was kind of a wise guy, kind of a, he'd hang up on you if you didn't talk to him the way he wanted you to. But I learned a lot because people would call in. Some people would call in and not know what the hell they were talking about. Other people would call in, and there'd be a lot of good information you get, and you learn from other people. I know when I was at the Browns games, there were people that sat by us that were very knowledgeable about what was going on, which I appreciated. Because you learn yourself. You think you know everything, but some people are watching even more than you are.
Exactly.
And I appreciate that.
I mean, me and you used to watch Les Levine's show all the time.
Oh, I loved Les.
Les is a Cleveland legend.
He was a famous guy. I mean, and there was a guy who was patient with his callers. He never got sarcastic or nothing. Unless they got mean with him, then he'd get rid of them right away.
Oh yeah.
But he was a good guy, and he knew his stuff. I always wanted to meet him because I really looked up to him. I thought he was one of the better sportscasters there was. And now, there's a couple guys that I like that are out there. I like this guy now, Carmen.
And Carmen. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I like him a lot. And now he's doing TV for Channel 8.
He is. Yeah. He's great. I love him.
He's very good. Very, very knowledgeable. And I got to meet him one time at a golf outing when the Bricklayers had a big golf outing. We invited all kinds of different trades and stuff. Well, we invited people from the radio stations, and they would come, and that's where I got to meet him. In fact, I met the other guy too, his buddy,
Anthony Lima.
Anthony Lima. I met him there that night too, and they were just starting then. That was a long time ago, but I thought this kid's a good guy because I had never heard of him. I just used to hear him on the night show. He had the late night, and like I said, and now I listen to him all the time because you pick up things. If you want to know about your teams, you not only have to know about who got traded, it's nice to know what teams and why they did this and why they're going to do that and where the money's going. That's another thing. The money is a big thing in sports today. The Browns and the Cavs have
the cap.
Money caps.
Yep.
Okay. Baseball does not. Baseball, it's a free-for-all. So the richest teams get by. Now, they always say, oh, they don't always win it, but they're always in it.
Yeah, they're always in it. They're always in the playoffs usually.
Yeah, because they always have the money. And that I don't like, especially because our guys don't. Yep. We don't have the kind of money that some of those people have,
Yes, the market size and everything else.
Yeah,
there's only 6 or 7 teams that can afford all the guys, and the rest of the 23 or 14, whatever it is, can't afford anybody. So you're constantly losing your stars.
The New York market, there's like 2 million people watching the games in Cleveland, and there's like 8 or 9 million watching it in New York.
Yeah, the market size. Yeah,
right. The market size.
It's market size. I think it's 12 million in New York or 15. It's huge.
Right, something like that. Yeah, and it's that's a big difference. But you don't know that either when you're younger and you're watching sports. It never dawned on me. But as I got older, you start to learn stuff like that, and I think anybody watching any sports today has to know all that if they want to enjoy their sports. Because, I remember guys telling me, oh, there's just people, when they watch sports, they just follow the ball. Well, I never did that. I always watched, like in baseball, I always watched if there was a ground ball to the second baseman. I was looking at the shortstop, and was he backing up the second baseman? And if the ball went into right field, who was backing up the right fielder? Did the center fielder get over there? It was stuff like that I really always got involved in. And a lot of people don't. People don't pay attention to that. And I know when I started coaching, I would teach a lot of the kids on my teams, hey, if you're going to back up, you got to back up here, you got to be here, you got to be there. And that's part of sports, is knowing all that. And today, I think that we have some pretty knowledgeable guys playing that are coming through the ranks.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I want to have a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
And number one is, give us some of your favorite broadcasters of all time. I know there's some great ones in Cleveland that came through.
Well, there's no doubt that Joe Tate was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Tate, there was nobody better than Joe Tate. When he did basketball, I don't know anybody that could make you really think you were at that game watching it go up and down. Joe Tate was the best. And obviously Jack Corrigan, because Jack was my buddy and grew up, and I really liked his style. And I'm trying to think of some of the other guys that we've had. I liked Herb Score. People didn't like him, but I really liked Herb Score. And then he passed away too. And then Ned Chandler I liked, and he was another guy that passed away young. There were a few other guys there that were pretty good. Cleveland's been lucky with that.
Yeah,
very good guys.
Tom Hamilton.
Tom Hamilton. Oh my God, yes. And then we had a guy who did the Browns games, and then his son. And I'm trying to think of
Casey Coleman.
Casey Coleman. His father did the Browns games in the 50s and 60s. And then Casey came along, and he was pretty good too.
He was.
So we were lucky on that effect, you know. And if you look around the league now, there's a lot of guys that were from Cleveland that are, you know, big in other parts of the country.
Yep, you're right.
They came from Cleveland, and I like that, you know. But like I say, Joe Tate would be my hero. He was just smooth and he was sarcastic too. He'd let the umpires know when they were screwing up. He had guts. He wasn't afraid to say what was on his mind. And I really liked him. And then he was so exciting. When something was happening big, boy, it was like you were right there on the floor watching it.
It was amazing.
Amazing. He was amazing.
He really painted the perfect picture. He really, I mean, anybody, again, the young generation never heard him, Matthew's generation and Brady and Bryce. They'll never understand how great he was and what.
No, they're not going to. He was just tremendous.
Yeah, he was.
I don't think you'll ever see anybody like that again. No. He was, and he could do all the sports too.
Yep.
And I mean, he did baseball and basketball, but he was really probably the best basketball announcer there was.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the NBA knew that because you'd hear them talk about him all the time.
Yep.
So.
And now we still have, you said we still have some great guys with all the sport. Jim Donovan's great. And
Jimmy Donovan.
We just had Doug Deacon retire. He's another great one.
And he was good.
Matt Underwood and Rick Manning. And, you know, there's a ton a lot of great guys out there. We're very lucky.
Absolutely. Very much so.
So, okay. One more question two more questions, actually.
All right.
Favorite sports memory in your life?
The 64 championship game for the Browns. Like I say, I can remember so vividly when Gary Collins caught that third touchdown pass. And you probably could catch that on YouTube or something. It was unbelievable back then for that catch he made. And I remember thinking he caught 3 touchdown passes in a championship game. That was a big deal. I mean, it still would be today if somebody did that. And you know, and Jim Brown was the guy everybody was watching and everybody that day. And then, like I said, Paul Warfield was the other receiver. And Paul Warfield came out, you know, as probably the best wide receiver in the game at that time. But Gary Collins really had a day. And that was a lot of pleasure that I enjoyed watching that, you know. And that was probably the best thing I was ever at. You know, I've seen a lot of good baseball games over the years, but probably that 64 championship game will always stand out as my biggest memory.
Okay. That's a hell of a memory to have. I remember, remember me and you went to a game. I was probably 13, 14 years old. And we always laugh about this. We were losing like 9-1 in the second inning against Tampa Bay. It was when they first got a team, the Devil Rays back then, now that the Rays. And you got pissed off and you said, we're getting out of here. Let's leave. We're getting killed. And we thought, we're not. It was probably third inning we leave. Now we get in the parking lot and we hear fireworks going off. And someone hit a home run. I think Tomey hit a home run. And then Manny hit a home run. We get back to the house and they were up by like 3 or 4 runs. The Indians were. And they had come back and won that game. Like some ridiculous score. It was like 18-12 or some crazy score. And they won that game. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
I hate to tell you how many times I did that. There were many times. I'd get so pissed if they were losing. I couldn't stand it. And like I said, I took it to heart. I took all those games to heart. And then you'd get home or on the way home, you'd hear on the radio. They'd be going crazy, and you're thinking, you should be sitting there now, you dumbass. And you'd be on your way home. But hey,
What about the time that Bob Long
yeah,
left one of the greatest playoff games in NFL history, and the
ever.
Browns, and he leaves at the end of the third quarter. We always mess with him
Oh,
about this.
yeah, it was. I can't think of the name. What
The
was
Jets. It was the Jets
it was the
game.
Jets.
Yeah, because Reggie
Yeah.
talks about it in the podcast.
Right. And it was an unbelievable game.
I think it was like 86. I think it would have been around then.
Yep. And Bobby got pissed and he left. He's gone. I'm going to the car.
And we were down by what, 10 at that point? I think,
we were down a little more than that. And all of a sudden, touchdown here, touchdown there. And then we were tied. And then I think we won the game on a field goal at the end. I can't remember exactly how it went now. But there was Bobby when I went back to the car, sitting in front of my car. He said, "Hey, how you doing, asshole? You left." You know what I mean? Well, the thing is, when he went back the next week, that whole section was doing that to him because they knew he left. You know what I mean? They're saying, "You dumbass, you left the best game of the year." And it should have scared me into never doing that again, but I've done it. I've gone to games and getting pissed. And
well, another one that is classic. Me, you, Brett, and the farmer that lived behind us went to a Utah Jazz Cavs game back in the early 90s.
That's
and
right.
That's when we had, Mark Price and Craig Elo. And I think it was Craig Elo. So we were down by, I don't know if it was 2 points. It must have been 2 points at the time, but I think John Stockton or Karl Malone hit 2 free throws. And for whatever reason, we started walking out. We weren't getting the ball on our end of the court. We were getting away in the other end. So we thought the game's over. There was like a second left or 2 seconds left. So we started walking out. And all of a sudden we walk out and there's guys running out going, we won. And we were looking around. We thought they were joking around. We thought, they must be busting their balls. We get in the car and Joe Tate's going, Craig Elo hits a 3 at the buzzer from almost half court.
And we missed
You've got to be kidding me. We missed it. Yep.
And the whole time I'm going, son of a bitch, all the way home. I was so pissed. But hey, the thing was, deep in my heart, I was happy. We won. I don't care if I was there or not. As long as we won, that's all I cared about.
Exactly. No, that's how I feel too.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's funny. So, okay, last question. And I ask this to every guest, as you know. When you look back at the legacy, when you look back at your life, Dad, what do you want people to know about the legacy of Joe Coreno?
That he was a sore loser when it came to his sports teams. He didn't like it when they lost, but that he was very loyal. I'm loyal to my friends. I'm loyal to anybody that's good to me. I'm good to you. And I always want them to remember that I was a loyal, good friend, and that's important. And my friends are important to me. My family's very important to me. And those are the things I hope they remember me as, that I was always loyal, especially if you're good to me. Now, if you screwed me somewhere, then you knew I was going to be mad at you the rest of my life. But if you were good to me, my friends came first, and whatever had to happen, I would do whatever I had to do for them.
I think that's all. I mean, that's you in a nutshell. One of the most loyal people I've ever met.
Well, that's what I try to be. I mean, my parents were, and I inherited that. And going back to our Thad Fusco, the city clerk, my grandfather, that was the most loyal man I ever met in my life. He taught me a lot of things that I'll never forget. And that was one of them. He was very good to the people that were good to him. I mean, and I remembered that as a kid, and I thought that's the way to be. And I still am try to be that way even to this day. But that's it.
I mean, this has been awesome having you on and talking to you about all this. It's cool because I get to interview someone who had such a big effect on my life. I mean, you and Brett and I've had, when it comes to sports, there's nobody that had a bigger effect on my life than you two.
Well, so, I want to tell the people out there that I'm so proud of you. I don't know how to act because they can't believe some of the things you've done, some of the people you've interviewed, but I think you do a wonderful job. I think you have a good appeal to people, and you know how to question people, and you know how to drag it out without making it boring. You ask the right questions, and that's hard to do. And I'm really proud of you.
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that.
Yep.
And again, it was awesome having you on the show, and it's just cool to have you on, of all people, to give your input on things, and, the person that had such influence on me in my whole life, Dad. So I thank you for that.
Well, like I said, you've had a lot of influence on me now as we got older. And like I said, I couldn't ask for more than a son that I got of you.
Thanks, Dad. It means a lot, and I love you. And thanks for doing this.
Yep. And I want to mention my grandson. I don't know if he's still here.
Hey, Matthew, come in here.
My grandson set this all up. I'm going to tell you right now, people that are watching, if I had to set this up, I would be here for the rest of my life because I wouldn't know what to do. And he came in here and he set it all up. He got the lighting right and everything. And he's my favorite. He's over here, Matthew. This is my daughter's oldest son. And I love this kid. I love all my grandsons, but he put all this together. In fact, he's shown you a lot of things, Brett.
He's my producer. He produces my show. So he's incredible. Yeah. Huge shout out to Matthew Bowman. Matthew Bowman. He's called by multiple names, but yeah, he's produces every podcast, and he's really a social media whiz, and he's a business whiz. He's just an awesome kid. And Matthew, thank you. This is a huge shout out for you too, because I mean, you do everything, and you're awesome at what you do. You really are.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. And that's it, I guess. I don't know if there's any more you want to do. I'd like to come back on again someday.
I would love that. Yeah.
And we'll do it again.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get Brett on here too.
Okay. Or both of us.
Yeah.
The same time, great. I could bust his balls while we're talking to him. So I love to do that too.
Oh yeah, you do.
And that's it. Well, I want to just tell everybody that I appreciate everybody that watches your show, tunes in and puts their, hits that thing where you're what do you call that? The
subscribe button.
Well, where it says that you're a constant listener or a constant thing. A subscriber.
Yeah, subscriber. Yep.
I couldn't think of it.
Yep.
And I appreciate everybody that does that. As Brad's father, I'm watching every episode, and like I said, everybody that's been on, thank you to all those people. And again, Brad, you do a great job.
Thanks, Dad. Much appreciated.
That's it.
All right, we'll have to do it again sometime. So
we sure will.
All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.